Japan just made a historic energy pivot, and it's shaking the foundations of global power. For the first time in modern history, Japan is turning its back on American oil and teaming up with China. Yes, China. This isn't some small trade deal. This is a dramatic shift by one of America's closest allies, a country that once depended on the U.S. for nearly all of its energy needs. And the craziest part? It all started because of policies from the Trump era, tariffs, trade wars, and a strategy that seemed strong on paper but may have backfired in a big way. This move isn't just about oil. It's about influence, survival, and the future of technology. The electric vehicle industry, the future of transportation, is now caught in the middle of this geopolitical tug-of-war. And what's happening behind closed doors could change everything from what powers your car to how much you pay at the pump. This is the story of how one deal could mark the beginning of a global energy realignment, and why the U.S. might be losing ground in a race it didn't even know it was still running. To understand why Japan's latest move is so shocking, we have to look back, way back, to the end of World War II. After Japan's defeat in 1945, the country was in ruins. It had lost access to natural resources, especially oil, which it desperately needed to rebuild its economy. The United States stepped in, not just with aid, but with energy. From the 1950s onward, Japan relied heavily on American oil and gas to power its recovery. It was a practical relationship, but also a political one. Japan needed energy security. The U.S. needed a strong ally in Asia, especially during the Cold War. As the Middle East became more unstable in the 1970s and 1980s, with oil embargoes and wars shaking the global market, Japan leaned even harder on the U.S. for stable energy supplies. America became a sort of energy bodyguard for Japan, offering not just crude oil, but later liquefied natural gas (LNG) contracts that kept Japan's economy humming. This alliance wasn't just about trade, it was about trust. Japan knew that through thick and thin, the U.S. would help keep the lights on. For decades, that was enough. But in the last few years, cracks have started to appear. Rising costs, changing technology, and a shifting global order are testing that trust. And Japan, once the loyal customer, is starting to shop around. Everything began to change during Donald Trump's presidency. On the surface, his energy strategy seemed strong boost American oil and gas exports, bring in more revenue, and reduce U.S. dependence on foreign energy. But what sounded like a power move ended up pushing allies like Japan into a corner. Trump imposed tariffs not just on rivals like China, but even on close allies, including Japan. These tariffs made imported goods more expensive and complicated trade agreements. At the same time, the U.S. pushed Japan to buy more American liquefied natural gas, LNG, and crude oil, often at higher prices than what was available on the global market. Imagine being told you have to buy your groceries only from one store, and that store charges more than everyone else. That's how Japan felt. China, meanwhile, was quietly offering Japan energy deals with fewer strings attached. Chinese companies began selling LNG at competitive prices. They even allowed long-term contracts with flexible terms, something the U.S. wasn't willing to offer. For a resource-hungry nation like Japan, that mattered a lot. By 2020, Japanese officials were openly frustrated. They were paying premium prices to stay loyal to America, while China was standing on the sidelines with better offers. In trying to make America energy dominant, Trump's policies unintentionally made U.S. energy less attractive to its closest partners. And Japan, once a loyal energy buyer, started looking east. While the U.S. focused on tariffs and short-term wins, China was playing a long game, quietly, steadily, and globally. Over the past decade, China has been on an energy shopping spree. It signed massive oil and gas deals with countries across Africa, Central Asia, and Russia. We're talking 20 to 30-year contracts, agreements that lock in prices and supply for decades. While other countries were thinking about the next election cycle, China was planning for the next generation. In 2018, China introduced something even more disruptive, the petro-yuan. This allowed countries to buy and sell oil in Chinese currency instead of US dollars. For decades, the world traded oil almost exclusively in dollars, a system known as the petrodollar. That system gave America a huge advantage. But with the petro-yuan gaining traction, especially in Asia, that dominance started to weaken. And Japan? It was watching all this unfold in real time. Chinese energy contracts came with fewer political demands. Payments could be made in different currencies. And more importantly, China wasn't pressuring Japan to pick sides in global disputes. It was subtle, but powerful. Like a skilled chess player, China was controlling more of the board, while the US kept trying to win with bold, risky moves. Japan's recent pivot is just the latest sign that China's strategy is working. Energy, once a tool of US influence, is now becoming China's weapon of choice in Asia. At first glance, this looks like just another oil deal. But underneath it all is something even more powerful: the electric vehicle revolution. The world is shifting from gas-powered cars to electric ones, and that shift depends on one thing: batteries. And guess who controls the global battery supply chain? China. Today, China produces about 80% of the world's EV batteries. But it's not just the factories. They also dominate the raw materials needed to make those batteries. We're talking about lithium, cobalt, nickel, and rare earth elements. These are the modern version of oil. Whoever controls them controls the future. Japan's automakers, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, know this better than anyone. They're racing to catch up to Tesla and China's BYD. But to compete, they need not only battery tech, they need cheap, reliable access to energy and minerals. And here's the problem: relying on the US for oil doesn't help with batteries. But partnering with China? That opens doors. China can offer Japan long-term oil deals and access to the battery supply chain. That's a 1-2 punch the US simply can't match right now. So when Japan shifts from US oil to Chinese oil, it's not just about fuel. It's about protecting its future in electric vehicles and staying in the global tech race. This isn't just energy diplomacy, it's economic survival. Then came the moment that shocked Washington and confirmed Tokyo's new direction: a massive oil and energy agreement between Japan and China. The deal, signed quietly but deliberately, involves Japan purchasing millions of barrels of oil annually from Chinese-controlled sources, many of which are linked to China's partnerships in Russia and the Middle East. But this isn't just a basic trade. This is a strategic alliance. The terms: favorable pricing, stable long-term contracts, and most importantly, bundled access to critical battery minerals and technology partnerships. In other words, Japan didn't just get oil, it got energy security and supply chain stability for its growing EV industry. This agreement mirrors what the US once had with Saudi Arabia during the Cold War: oil for security. Back then, the US protected Saudi Arabia and in return got guaranteed oil. But now the roles have flipped, and China is calling the shots. By giving Japan what the US wouldn't, affordable, reliable energy plus tech cooperation, China has pulled off something few thought possible, convincing one of America's closest allies to pivot east. This deal changed everything. It wasn't just a trade, it was a message to the world. China is now the go-to power for energy and innovation. To many in Washington, Japan's move came out of nowhere. After all, Japan had been one of America's most loyal allies for over 70 years. They shared military bases, economic partnerships, and diplomatic strategies. So how could this shift have happened under the radar? Simple. The US wasn't paying close enough attention to the pressure building behind the scenes. For years, Japan had been warning about the rising cost of energy, especially after US tariffs made American liquefied natural gas, LNG, more expensive. Japan was paying up to 20% more for US energy than other countries. At the same time, its domestic industries, especially the EV sector, were struggling with high production costs and intense global competition. Japan felt stuck, and while the US assumed their alliance was unshakable, Japan was quietly exploring alternatives. Meanwhile, China offered something the US didn't: long-term stability and industrial synergy. China didn't lecture Japan about its domestic policies. It didn't add extra conditions. It just offered cheap energy and access to the most important supply chains of the future. By the time US officials realized what was happening, the deal was done. They had underestimated how desperate Japan was to stay competitive in the EV and tech race. In short, the US assumed loyalty, but Japan acted on survival. Japan's auto industry is famous. For decades, names like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan have dominated the global car market. But now, they're facing a crisis. The world is shifting fast toward electric vehicles, and Japan is falling behind. While Tesla leads in the US and BYD surges in China, Japan's automakers are playing catch-up. Toyota, for example, invested heavily in hybrid technology, but was slow to commit to fully electric cars. Now they're racing to build EV factories and battery plants, but that takes time, energy, and raw materials. And here's where the dilemma hits. Making EVs is expensive, especially if you're paying a premium for oil and electricity. Japanese companies need low-cost, stable energy to power their factories and supply chains. They also need access to lithium, cobalt, and rare earths, materials that China controls. So when China offered a deal that included oil, minerals, and even tech partnerships, Japan's industry saw an opportunity it couldn't ignore. This wasn't about politics, it was about survival in a brutally competitive global market. By choosing China, Japanese automakers are betting they can stay in the game. But the cost? A major shift in alliance and a growing dependence on their biggest competitor. Japan's pivot wasn't just a surprise, it's a warning shot. If a country is closely tied to the US as Japan can switch energy partners, who's next? Let's look around Asia and beyond. South Korea depends heavily on imported oil and gas. Like Japan, it's racing to compete in the EV market with companies like Hyundai and Kia. If energy costs rise and US support wavers, Seoul could be tempted by China's cheaper bundled offers, just like Tokyo was. India, another fast-growing economy, is also in play. It's trying to expand manufacturing and lower energy imports. China's Belt and Road Initiative has already connected India's neighbors, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, to Chinese energy infrastructure. If India feels left behind, it might seek better deals with China too, even if it's politically tricky. Europe is also watching closely. Countries like Germany and France want to go green, fast, but they need affordable resources to do it. With the US caught up in domestic battles and energy prices rising, China could offer what Washington can't, a clean energy pipeline at a discount. This isn't just about oil, it's about influence. China is using energy the way the US once did with military bases and aid packages. Quietly, efficiently, and strategically. One country falls, then another. That's how global power shifts. Not all at once, but one domino at a time. It's easy to assume the US has lost Japan for good, but that might not be the full story. Washington isn't standing still. President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, was a big move. It offers huge subsidies for electric vehicles, batteries, and clean energy tech made in North America. The goal? To bring manufacturing back home and rebuild alliances. Japan is actually part of that plan. Under special agreements, Japanese companies can qualify for these subsidies if they build EV parts or batteries in the U.S. This creates an incentive to stay close. Plus, the U.S. still offers something China can't: military protection and political alignment. Japan is worried about China's rise too. It's not fully comfortable depending on Beijing for everything. That means the door isn't fully closed. But there's a catch. For the U.S. to win Japan back on energy, it can't just rely on loyalty or defense ties. It has to offer better deals. That means cheaper LNG, faster permit approvals, access to minerals, and fewer restrictions. In other words, the U.S. needs to compete, not just politically, but economically. If it doesn't, Japan's pivot could become permanent. And worse, it could inspire others to follow. The clock is ticking. China isn't just selling oil and energy to Japan, they're also making a bold technology trade-off. In the deal, China is demanding access to some of Japan's most valuable innovations, especially in hydrogen fuel cells and solid-state batteries. These technologies are considered the future of clean energy and next-generation electric vehicles. Why does China want this? Because controlling tech patents means controlling the future. If China can integrate these breakthroughs into its own EV and energy sectors, it won't just be an energy powerhouse. It'll dominate global clean tech. For Japan, this is a tough choice. Energy security versus technology sovereignty. By agreeing, Japan risks giving away its competitive edge. But without this deal, their EV industry might struggle to survive. It's a high-stakes game of give and take, where oil isn't just fuel, it's a currency to buy influence and innovation. This twist changes the rules. The energy war is no longer about barrels of oil or cubic meters of gas. It's about who controls the technology that powers tomorrow. One of the biggest shocks from Japan's new energy deal is the currency used for payment. Traditionally, oil and energy trades have been done in US dollars. This is called the petrodollar system, and it's been a pillar of American economic power for decades. Every time a country buys oil, they pay in dollars, which keeps demand for the US currency high. But Japan's deal with China reportedly involves payment in Chinese yuan. The first time a major energy importer is switching away from dollars in a big way. This might seem small, but it's huge. If more countries start paying in yuan, the US dollar's global dominance could weaken. This would reduce America's ability to influence global finance and could push up borrowing costs at home. Add to this the growing BRICS coalition, countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, who are also moving away from the dollar. And you see a pattern. The petrodollar might not disappear overnight, but this trend could slowly chip away at the economic power the US has enjoyed since World War II. In short, Japan's energy deal could be one of the early cracks in a global financial order that's been steady for over 70 years. The big question now is, can the US catch up and respond to this shift? There are a few strategies America could use to stay in the game. First, strategic oil reserves. The US has one of the largest in the world. Using this wisely can help stabilize energy prices during supply shocks. Second, speeding up EV adoption and manufacturing. The Inflation Reduction Act is pushing this, but the US needs to produce more batteries and EV parts domestically to compete with China's dominance. Third, there's a race to mine and process rare earth minerals like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, key ingredients for batteries. The US currently depends heavily on imports, so building a local supply chain is critical. Lastly, investing in clean energy technologies, like hydrogen fuel cells and solid-state batteries, could give the US a technological edge. Adapting won't be easy or quick, but with the right focus, the US could still protect its energy future and maintain global influence. The energy game has changed. Japan's historic shift from US oil to China isn't just a headline. It's a wake-up call. The question now is simple. Will the US wake up and secure its energy future? Will America step up with smarter policies, stronger alliances, and faster innovation? Or will China continue rewriting the rules and leave the US struggling to keep up? This isn't just about countries. It's about the future of technology, the global economy, and the everyday choices we all make. What do you think? Is the US ready for this challenge? Or is it already too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into how these global shifts impact your world, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.